Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic. If, instead of rebooting movies, it became a trend to retell them from a different character's perspective, what film would you want to see retold and from whose point of view? The Matrix from Agent Smith's view. Constantly trying to quell the stupid human insurrection. I was going to say The Matrix from Morphu's point of view. The prequel being how he learns of the One and getting his band of folks to find Neo. I'd actually like to see The Matrix from Cypher's point of view. The path that leads his bitterness and resentment to betray everyone, obviously the climax of the film being his failure and death. Mean Girls, as told by Regina George. This could also go dark. Her home life was obviously messed up. What was growing up in that household like? Imagine Regina flashbacks. Have you felt her mom's boobs? They're hard as rocks. Matrix, but from the perspective of a regular police detective trying to stop the murder spree of these crazy people who kill everybody without reason. At one point he would interrogate Neo. So you believe that nothing if real. That's why you can kill random people. Because they don't exist. No. The world is fake but the people are real. And you kill them anyway. That sounds like it could be exceptionally fun if the cop in question begins to learn to bend the rules of the Matrix. He is exposed to enough of the rebels' antics to believe and seek out the truth and how to use /experience it, but still decidedly falls on the side of people still living in the system, defending the innocents who are callously overlooked in this higher-level war. They mostly get their ass kicked, but manage to save just enough people, just enough of the time, to maintain a morale and sense of purpose. Later on, the Smith virus takes hold and they desperately try to create a hidden community in this world, meant to parallel the rebels' colony in the real world, and just as that begins to hopelessly fall in upon itself, the final fight ensues upon Neo's return. The story of how Grandpa Joe got into bed and then decided to just stay there, the lazy old cunt. Explain yourself. r/Grandpa Joe hate. What the actual duck? I thought this would only have a few hundred people joined and only posts from years past. Ender's Shadow did this exact thing with Ender's Game. Done by the original author, no less. And it is brilliant. The whole Shadow series is seriously one of the best stories I've ever read. Series. I know only the first book. You're saying there were more? Or are you referring to the speaker for the dead stuff? Toy Story. Andy, a young boy who enjoys playing with his toys in his spare time, often wanders into his room to find things off. Something may have moved, a toy may have vanished only to reappear the next day. Voices are heard from his room from the ground floor only to hear a slight panic, then silence whenever he approaches the room again. And imagine, one day, if he heard this talking once again only to walk into his room, hear the split-second shock to silence just to see his favorite cowboy toy laying on the floor. Only this time, just before he laid his eyes on the toy, he could see in the corner of his eye the left hand of Woody just slightly flop to the ground. Flop to the ground as if he just fell. But, how could a toy fall if it was laying on the ground to begin with? That's if it was laying on the ground the whole time. He begins to think that he is never truly alone in his room anymore, and those beady toy eyes that face him in the night while he's sleeping aren't just facing him out of chance. They're watching him. They're looking. Andy isn't alone. Nor was he ever alone. This is the tale of a boy who loses his mind at the thought that he has never been alone for his entire life, and that the friends he made growing up may be a little more real than he first thought. A little too real. You just simultaneously ruined my childhood, and made me extremely nervous about my GF stuffed animal sleeping in our room. Oh God. The things you two do in front of them. I'd rather see a Sid movie that shows how he reacts to finding out toys are alive. He's probably the only human who knows. He seemed relatively well adjusted in Toy Story 3. Garbage men can make decent money. It's a Wonderful Life from Mary, the wife's point of view. Married to a dreamer with fits of depression, while raising 4 kids, rebuilding a beautiful old Victoria house, helping him make his dream of helping his community come true, and trying to protect him from his loser uncle, all while watching him spiral into a deeper and deeper depression. Will she be able to help him out of it? Edit. People are taking issue with my character Isaac helping his community as a dream rather than an obligation. I'd say more of a sense of duty than an obligation, but anyway it's semantics to me. Yes, it wasn't the dream he sacrificed, but it was his life's work, and people do have dreams to be a certain kind of person and do good in the world. From Mary's POV, I do think she was helping him fulfill his dream to have a fulfilling life. His romantic dreaming to travel and be an engineer were all fueled by wanting to have a fulfilling life. Absolutely, she can help him out of it. I'd almost argue that Mary is the most important character in that movie. She drives a large amount of the action. Who declares marriage at the age of like 8? Mary. Who offers their honeymoon money to save the bank? Mary. Who goes around asking neighbors and friends for help against the feds when George goes missing? Mary. She's the best. Not to mention buying an old house and fixing it up while having 4 kids underfoot and helping all the working class neighbors move into their new homes, dealing with a mother who obviously didn't like her choice in husbands and constantly being an optimist. Movie should have been called It's a Wonderful Wife. I get a little ticked at George every time he goes up the stairs and gets pissy because she hasn't gotten around to fixing the banister yet. Star Wars from the Empire's POV, basically telling the story about this terrorist group that was planning the biggest act of terrorism in the galaxy's history, the destruction of a military peacekeeping starbase. We follow the Empire's anti-terrorism unit as they try to find the spies transporting the stolen plans and head off the attack. Not a retelling of any of the movies, but there was a Star Wars novel in the IATs where each chapter retold the same story from a different character's point of view, with most chapters extending the story and occasionally introducing new characters, who then got a turn in the spotlight in a later chapter. It was my favorite Star Wars novel. Edit, I couldn't remember the title, but others have posted the titles. Apparently there were a few of them. Rather than try and get them all here, I'm going to say read on, as there are many excellent suggestions including Beyond Star Wars. There's also From a Certain Point of View, a book that was published a few years ago. It did the same thing for A New Hope, telling stories from the perspective of 40, I think, background characters in the original movie. Alternatively, an hour and a half's worth of stormtroopers patrolling and sweeping the floors of the Death Star, with an explosion at the end. We would pitch it as a Clark's-style comedy. A solid hour and a half of Imperial-themed humor with no reference to the larger timeline. It ends mid-sentence with an explosion. Throw in a quick joke about ignoring alarms because it is probably just another boring training exercise. It could be pretty low budget too. A couple of convincing stormtrooper costumes and 1, maybe 2 vaguely science-fi sets /backgrounds. Probably a droid too. One of those mouse droid shells over a cheap RC car. Come on people, this is gold. Am I a Hollywood executive yet? Willy Wonka from the point of view of an Oompa Loompa who is working to ignite a slave rebellion amongst his people. Oompa Loompa do petit dad, sees the means of production, comrade. Oompa Loompa do ba dee do. Who benefits from the labor we do? We organized to vouch for our few. Then Willy candid the head of our crew. We still live and work for him too. Solidarity's our only way through. Oompa Loompa do ba dee dee. Fight the man so someday we're free. John Wick would become a horror film. There's a couple scenes where he just comes off as this horrible unstoppable machine, a whole movie of that would be wild. Foot soldiers pissing themselves because they know Wick is gonna murk them but they have no option but to die fighting. I still like the part where he talks to the one bodyguard casually then ends it with why don't you take the night off and they reply I think I will. He knows exactly what is about to go down and he just nopes the fuck out without hesitation. Frozzo. Where was his super suit? Frozzo and his wife as a romantic comedy. Is she super? Is she ordinary? Does that make the least difference to her? Just keep the gag of never showing her on screen. Any action movie from the perspective of a goon, a random, unimportant member of an evil force who would in any typical scenario serve as just another body the protagonist would blow away. He might not be the mastermind but he has a name, face below that mask, his own story, his family, and he will protect that murky warehouse for his boss as long as he has bullets in his MP5, even if he isn't that much of a sharpshooter. Reminds me of the premise of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. It takes these two background characters from Hamlet and creates a really interesting surreal story. It's been a long time since I've read/seen it, so I'm sure I'm doing it no justice here. It's a great play by Tom Stoppard, made into a superb film written and directed by Tom Stoppard, starring Gary Oldman and Tim Roth as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Probably my favorite part of The Mandalorian was in the last episode where a couple of stormtroopers were just standing around talking about all the crazy shit their bosses were doing. Definitely the funniest scene, and better still that the stormtroopers are Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally. Jurassic Park Lost World, except from Ij's perspective. Jurassic Park from the Velociraptor's perspective. He's right. I am a clever girl. Ij means nobody in Norwegian, so your comment confused me for a sec. Forrest Gump from Jenny's perspective. Edit, SP. That would be so depressing. But would probably be such a sweet portrayal of Forrest's pure love to her in contrast to all the other shit she has to go through, and we will get a good inner dialogue of how she finds it difficult to respond to that emotion for most of her life. From Johnson's perspective. So basically it's a biopic of LBJ, but in the middle of it some autistic guy tells him about getting shot in the ass. From Lieutenant Dan's legs perspective. The movie would blow us all away.